Welcome to the show. I'm Danella, and here's what's happening now. In our world this week, hey, we're talking about this. If you're a creative person stuck in a writer's block, you'll never guess what the trick is. Yes, a new study out talks about the great effects of multitasking. Yeah, we'll get into that in just a moment. Pretty surprising. Also, political pop, that's on deck. Hey, Obamacare is expected to raise in 2019. And guess what? Even if you're not on it, this will affect you. We'll get into that. But first, we'll talk about volcanoes. Hawaii still happening there on the Big Island. Also, Guatemala, Indonesia. We'll talk more in depth about Guatemala because that's where the biggest disaster has struck. Unfortunately, there they say 99 people at least have died. They're still looking for nearly 200 people. Entire villages smothered in ash and rock. Terrible, terrible there. They say there are an estimated 3,500 people in shelters. It's good to see the community there are helping one another out. One of the stories that we're hearing from off of the ground there is that a woman that owned a beauty academy school, her name is Naomi Diaz. She said this, she said that she offered her services as well as her student services. They all volunteered and gave free haircuts. Why? Because she said some of the women there, their hair burns so badly that they cannot comb it. And this was her way. And all the volunteers that volunteered, this is their way of helping the people affected just feel some sense of normalcy. Very tragic situation in Guatemala. Going to keep praying for them as they work through recovery efforts. Also this week, designer Kate Spade was found dead in her apartment as a result of suicide. Some say that she had been struggling with depression. However, the suicide came as a shock. Kate Spade was 55 years old and she left behind a 13-year-old daughter. And just a few days later, Anthony Bourdain found dead in his hotel room in France. He was 61 years old. Also suicide, also by hanging. The talented chef, writer, storyteller will be missed. He also leaves behind a daughter. We are praying for both his family and the Spades. Suicide is on the rise in the United States, but they found that talking helps lower the chances of suicide. If you or someone you know is struggling in the U.S., call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 1-800-273-8255. And now let's head all the way up to Canada. We're going to talk about Canada. Why? Because they are the first G7 nation to legalize marijuana. Yes. So it's interesting. Some people are really discussing the backlash of totally making it legal because for a while there, okay, obviously you would have your illegal drug dealers, but they said that they also had illegal sellers that, set up shops where you can come in and buy it, illegal dispensaries. Well, now they're making it totally legal, which is going to knock out those illegal dispensaries. And then what's going to happen to the local drug dealer? It's interesting. We never really think about it. Also thinking about, what's going to happen to the quality of the marijuana that folks are buying there. Some say that it's less THC in it and it's going to be more expensive. So on one end, they're not too worried. Some drug dealers aren't really worried about how the government will affect them. But this is why it's important, because they said that once they started seeing marijuana become more legal, then you started to see more drug dealers pushing harder drugs to make a profit. Harder drugs like fentanyl, as well as heroin, other drugs, crack, cocaine. And so that's one of the concerns that they're having is once marijuana becomes legal, will it force the recreational drug dealer or professional drug dealer that focused only in marijuana, that tends to be a low crime activity. Usually marijuana dealers are chill, marijuana users are chill. But some of these dealers, if they're in it for the money, might have to get a new, more dangerous hustle, bigger risk for bigger rewards. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there. Yeah, first G7 nation to legalize marijuana, Canada. Now, did you hear this story? Man, pizza delivery guy, right? He in New York delivering to a military base in Brooklyn. First of all, I didn't know there was a military base in Brooklyn. And I've lived in Brooklyn. Where was I? Anyway, so he delivers this pizza to a military base in Brooklyn. They detain him and now he's being deported. This is really crazy to me. So here's the story. He's delivered pizzas to this military base before, okay? And in order to gain access to the base, you have to present an ID. Well, he presented a New York City identification card. Now, that's available to all New York City residents. You don't have to be a citizen to have that card. So this time, Pablo Villavicencio, a father of two from Ecuador, he was working to get his citizenship. It's been quite difficult for him. Hasn't gotten it yet. So now he's being detained by ICE. So they held him at the military base, questioned him. 2 hours later, ICE agents show up. They detain him, and now he is in the process of being deported. It's a tricky situation because a lot of people argue. The argument is, right, we can't take everybody in that wants to come to America. That's the argument. However, oh man, this poor guy, man, he's working a job trying to take care of his family and working. He had applied and tried to get citizenship, and it's very difficult to get citizenship. And then here he is deported. And, I actually had an interesting conversation about this week. I am the godmother of one of my dearest, oldest, closest friends. And she lives in Kenya. She's an American, and her husband. Her husband is a Kenyan. Now she lives in Kenya. Well, anyway, she was just talking about the idea, and she said, in a lot of other countries, you can't do what you can do in America. For example, she was saying how you can come to America, even if you're not from here, have a baby, your baby's a legal citizen. And she was saying that it was really difficult for her, for example, even though she lives in Kenya, she still is an American citizen. It's very difficult to become a Kenyan citizen. Very, very difficult. In fact, her child, even though her child was born in Kenya, she had to obtain an American citizenship for her child because in Kenya, it doesn't matter if you're born there, you're not a legal resident. And so as we were discussing it, my argument is, immigration is very, very tricky. And to me, what's more important is to make it better in the sense of this. Maybe we can't take in every single person. That's true. However, it's unfair to separate parents from their children. If an immigrant comes over illegal, you are a criminal and your child is taken away from you and put with a sponsor. That's crazy. I mean, you separating a family, that's great. Something needs to be fixed there. You're ripping a child away from its mother's arms. That's crazy. So on one end, I get it. She's like, it's harder as a citizen for her to, get citizenship for her son. She was like, I had to apply. It took some time, but then somebody else can just come here, have a baby, and that child's a citizen. So my argument to her was, okay, that's a good point. Maybe the government should change that. However, you have so many people here working positive, making a positive difference here in America, and have been here for years and cannot gain citizenship. Their entire family lives here. And I mean, I get it. If you are a criminal, you out here on the streets, okay, go back to your country. But people that are here working hard to make this a better place, I feel like it's just completely unfair. And here, this guy just working, delivering pizzas. And now he has to be separated from his family. I can't even imagine. I can't imagine what's that like. I mean, I know there's legal ways to come here, but we do have to have the honest conversation that it is very difficult to legally come here, even if you have your family here that are residents. My old coworker Teray from BET's The Black Carpet, he had a saying that I think applies here. He said this, he used to say, better than bad ain't good. And I don't know if people have said that, but when he said it, I had never heard it. And it made me laugh in a sense. But his argument is you can't make poor comparisons, and then say that something's good because it's a subpar comparison. So definitely in this case, better than bad. It's not good. And yesterday I mentioned this, if you caught my political pop, Alice Marie Johnson is now a free woman. We talked about this on last week's show as well. Well, Kim Kardashian went to the White House. She discussed prison reform as well as clemency for Alice Marie Johnson. She was in jail for a drug charge as well as money laundering charges. She was sentenced to life. It was her first offense. And so far, she's served 2 decades behind bars. So now she's 63 years old and she is free. She called Kim Kardashian West an angel. And in fact, they say that Kim was the person to break the news to her over the phone that she was actually going to be released as time served. So I feel proud of Kim for stepping out there and using her voice for something good. She's a very smart businesswoman. Say what you want, but she is a very smart businesswoman, and it's awesome to see her just really stepping out there for someone like Mrs. Johnson. Now, before we get into political pop, another update. Again, mentioned this as well in political pop earlier this week. All right, so Paul Manafort, right? It came out earlier this week that there's an allegation of him tampering with witnesses. Yeah, trying to get folks to change their testimony. So now Mueller going a step further. He's requesting that witnesses turn in their cell phones to look at their encrypted messages. Why? Because they said that is the way in which Paul Manafort attempted to tamper with witnesses. Ooh. Innocent people don't act that way. But it's just an allegation. That's what they're saying. It's an allegation. And now it's time for political pop. Here is your political pop for Friday, June 8th. Get ready. Obamacare premiums could jump to double digits by 2019. Keep in mind, it's June, so that's like 6 months away. That's not that far away. Could be sooner. Insurers in several states have already requested large hike rates for 2019. Places like Kaiser Permanente want to boost their premiums by more than 37% on average. In Maryland, Care First is asking for 18.5% rate bump for its HMO plans and a 91% spike for its PPO policies. And so when you hear things like this, you think to yourself, oh, it's affecting people on Obamacare. Well, it really affects the folks that aren't on Obamacare. Why? Because Obamacare enrollees won't have to pay more for coverage next year, regardless of how much the insurers hike up the money. That's because they receive federal subsidies that limit their rates to less than 10% of their income. So who else has to pay the bill? Hikes will hit the millions of Americans who earn too much for subsidies or who buy individual coverage outside of Obamacare. First gas prices and now this. So prepare. This summer, I know people like to travel, spend a lot of money, do a lot of things, but keep increasing your savings because folks are going to be hit hard very soon. And that is your political pop. All right. In our world is just about to come up. But before we do, we have to talk about hashtag bye bye bikini. I don't even know how I feel about this. I'm just putting it out there. Okay, did you hear about this? Miss America, they're making new rules actually in response to the Me Too movement. Yeah, this is the first time Miss America, their heads are all women. In fact, the three women that are running Miss America pageant are all former winners. That's pretty amazing. That's cool. And this is what they're saying. They're saying, hashtag bye bye bikini. They're eliminating the bikini contest in the pageant. They also are making a couple changes with the evening gown. They said that with the evening gowns, it's pretty much you can wear whatever you want to wear. And they're saying that the pageant is going to focus less on physical appearance, but more of about your character. So instead of the bikini contest, instead contestants will interact live with the judges, and they'll get to talk about what their passions and talents are and how those talents and passions will help the Miss America do her job. Yes, a lot of changes happening as women work toward equality. I know some women feel like, even women feel like, it's why would you remove the swimsuit competition? It doesn't make sense. Actually, some women have spoke out and said, women shouldn't have to cover up. And I kind of feel like it's not so much about that. I don't think that that's really what they're saying. I think it's more about, imagine a Miss America being a woman who is more recognized for being of substance, you know, intelligence and substance, and not just beauty. And now it's time for In Our World. This week, challenging the way you think. A new study is out praising multitasking, saying this multitasking can actually help the creative process. This is actually really innovative, and this is something you can actually try on your own. The argument is this: what they're doing is challenging the idea of really focusing intently on one thought. A lot of people feel that, hey, if you want to solve a problem, eliminate all distraction, just focus on that one task at hand, and then eventually you'll solve it. The other thing, too, this study really challenges is the idea of group work. So, a team at the Columbia Business School did a simple creativity laboratory experiment. What they did was they asked the participants to explain the use of an common object, all the multiple uses. So, for example, it could say, describe the use for a pot. A creative way for using a pot could be, oh, it could collect water from a leaky ceiling, right? So, what the participants had to do was, one group had to figure out how to describe various uses for two objects, right? Either, let's say, a brick, and let's say a pot. The first group had to do one at a time. So list all of the uses for the brick. Now list all of the uses for the pot. Now the other group got to do both at the same time. So you can imagine who would probably have the most uses in the allotted time. No, you wouldn't. You would think that the first group would, but in fact, that's not true. The second group, the multitasking group, actually came up with more uses and more creative uses for the two objects they were being asked to think of uses for. They found that 51% of the multitaskers were able to solve both problems, whereas only 14% of the participants who looked at them sequentially were able to actually solve both problems. So here's what you can test out on your own. Right. Let's say you're thinking of something creative, and you're like, oh, I just can't get the title for something. Or, I want to think of a new name for this or that. What they suggest doing is keep a notepad handy beside you, right? And do something else. And every so often, go back to the idea that you're thinking about. One thing that my nephew's doing, he's working on this new creative thing. He wants to create a game. And so he said to me, he said, Auntie, I have all the ideas for this whole scenario, but I can't think of the world in which, this scenario unfolds. So now I'm going to have him try it. I'm going to say, keep a notepad on you, do something else, do something totally different. research something else, study something else, read something else, and every so often have your mind go back to what you're trying to solve. And what they say is you'll get to a solution faster. That's exciting. I love multitasking, except in cleaning. If I'm cleaning, I like to have one thing done. I don't like it when it's like a bunch of little things messy. That's how my husband kind of cleans. He if he that's why I just do most of it, because he'll, for example, let's say he's washing clothes and maybe he wants to clean the bathroom. I'll come back to the bathroom and it's like rugs are out, but maybe the floor's not mopped yet. I'm like, "Wait, what's happening? Wait, can I use this? Is this under construction? What's happening here?" Because he likes to just, I don't know what his plan is. I cannot be around him. If he's, for example, cooking, I have to leave the kitchen. It's a huge mess. I can't operate like that. With cleaning, I like a nice little box. But creatively, oh, I love multitasking. And so now it's like great to kind of hear, hey, there's a study that says it's actually beneficial, because a lot of people give multitaskers a hard time. And also group activities. I want to bring this part up of this study because this was interesting, because a lot of people think when you're in a group, you get more work done. And I argue this anytime I have to work creatively, and this we're talking about creative work. Anytime I have to work creatively in a group, I'm like, what is it that we're working on? I'll come up with some ideas on my own, and then we come together. Because what they say is that when you're in a group setting, what happens is one person can say one idea, and it takes the whole group off to that idea. And what if that's not the best path for the idea? And so they say that in this study, it is best to work individually, then come together, because you're more likely to have more innovative ideas, as opposed to looking at one item and you're like, what should be the name of this item? They say it actually takes longer if you're in a group. And I have to agree. Anytime I've worked on a show, it's always been a group. And when we have to think of show ideas creatively, bothers me. I'd rather come in with some ideas and say, how about this? How about this? And then we can just grow more. But if you come clean slate and you're trying to build together, oh, I swear it takes forever. A lot of times it takes forever. So, multitaskers, do you, boo? Don't let nobody stop your multitask shine when you're being creative. I just have to keep saying creative. It's about being creative. So, just try it. Next time you're trying to think of something, I don't know, you're planning a party, or I don't know, thinking of anything creative. If you feel stuck in a rut and you have writer's block, then multitask. Keep that notepad by your side and watch the magic happen. Yeah, and let me know how it goes. And you're welcome. I'm so silly. All right. Thank you so much for joining the show. Of course, email me. Continue to email me, DanellaNOW.com. I truly appreciate you coming back each week and checking me out. On social media, all platforms, you can reach me at DanellaNOW. As always, have an incredible weekend, and I will see you next week.